After his wife divorced him to marry his billionaire boss, everyone in Dallas thought Noah Grant's life was over. A poor man discarded like an old suit in a city where power, money, and status defined worth. Once a loyal financial analyst, he watched the woman he loved walk out of their modest home straight into the arms of Edward Stone, the ruthless CEO who controlled both his career and his heart's undoing. His own family mocked him, whispering that failure ran in his blood. But as champagne glasses clinked at the wedding of his ex-wife and his boss, no one imagined the poor man they laughed at was already holding the key to a $50 billion secret that would soon shake every boardroom, every marriage, and every ounce of pride they built their lives upon. Who really owned the fortune no one saw coming? Why did the will reading leave every powerful name in Dallas frozen in disbelief? And how did the man they mocked for losing everything become the one whose revenge crushed them all? Under the fading gold of a Dallas evening, Noah Grant sat still at the dining table of the small home he and Lydia once dreamed would be their beginning. The table was half empty now. Her perfume lingered faintly in the air, but her laughter was gone. Across from him, Lydia stood with a suitcase, every item she packed symbolizing a piece of their crumbling marriage. The silence between them carried years of unspoken tension, and though Noah wanted to reach for her hand, the diamond bracelet on her wrist, Edward Stone's gift, stopped him. "I can't live like this anymore, Noah," she said, her voice trembling with both anger and finality. "You talk about dreams, but I can't keep waiting for someday. Edward understands what success means. He gives me what you can't: stability." Noah's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her that Titan Holdings' new algorithm, the very one he designed, was weeks away from pitching to investors. But Lydia's mind was made up. He had seen the change long before tonight, her phone calls growing longer, her affection shorter. He'd seen her reflection in Edward's office glass, leaning close, laughing too easily. When she removed her wedding ring, she didn't even hesitate. "You'll thank me one day," she said softly, not out of cruelty but certainty. "You're not built for this world, Noah. You're too honest." Honest. The word cut deeper than she knew. At the courthouse a week later, she arrived in a sleek black Mercedes driven by Edward's chauffeur. Cameras caught the glint of her new diamond earrings, rumored to cost more than Noah's annual salary. She didn't look back once as the judge read the decree. Noah's lawyer whispered something about alimony, but he barely heard. His parents sat behind him, their faces tight with shame. His mother, Irene, leaned toward his father, whispering, "We told him she'd leave him. Who marries without a plan?" And just when Noah thought he could quietly disappear, Edward's attorney approached him outside the courtroom with a sealed envelope. Inside, his termination letter from Titan Holdings, effective immediately. For the first time, the weight of everything crashed down. He had lost his wife, his job, and the last shred of his dignity, all within an hour. He walked home in silence that night, through the same street where he used to walk Lydia home from work. His mind replayed every argument, every promise. There was a time when she believed in him, back when he worked on Project Helix, the cybersecurity algorithm that had consumed his nights. She'd sit beside him with tea, teasing him for being obsessed with numbers and codes. He'd laugh, saying, "Someday, this will change everything." Now that dream sat locked away in an old hard drive, half finished, forgotten. In the dim glow of his apartment, he stared at his reflection in the window. Behind that reflection, the city pulsed with life, cars, towers, success stories that weren't his. He didn't drink, he didn't break. He just sat there breathing as if every exhale was a surrender. And then, out of nowhere, his computer chimed. A scheduled reminder blinked across the screen. Project Helix, patent renewal due. He stared at it for a long time, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Lydia's words echoed. "You're not built for this world." He clicked open the folder. Line after line of code lit the screen. The algorithm he once abandoned, now staring back at him. He began to type, not for her, not for revenge, but because something inside him refused to die. Hours turned into dawn. His fingers moved with precision, every command rewriting not just data, but destiny. He knew Edward had access to the earlier prototype. He also knew that meant Edward had unknowingly built his empire on stolen ground. Noah saved the final version with a new name, Helix Core Technologies. Before shutting down his laptop, he made one call to a number on a crumpled business card he'd once received at a tech symposium. A woman's calm voice answered. "This is Aurora Capital," she said. Noah hesitated, then replied quietly, "This is Grant. I'm ready to sell the beta." For the first time in months, he smiled, not out of joy, but certainty. He didn't know that the woman on the other end, Evelyn Monroe, would one day become his silent ally, nor that tonight's call would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the same people who had mocked him. As the sun rose over Dallas, Lydia Stone, formerly Grant, woke in Edward's penthouse, sipping champagne as news headlines declared Titan Holdings' growing dominance in cybersecurity. She smiled, believing her choices had secured her future. Miles away, in a dim apartment filled with glowing code and determination, Noah whispered to himself, "You took my peace. Now I'll build something you can't touch." And as the morning light caught his reflection in the window, it no longer showed the man she left behind, but the man the world was about to meet. Night after night, the lights in Noah's apartment flickered against the same peeling walls. His neighbors heard only the low hum of his computer, unaware that inside that dim space something monumental was being reborn. The city outside pulsed with noise, cars honking, laughter from rooftop bars, the rhythm of lives moving forward. Yet Noah lived suspended in silence, between the man he used to be and the one he was slowly becoming. Every job application he sent was either ignored or politely declined. Word had spread quietly across the finance district. Edward Stone had blacklisted him. Some claimed he'd leaked Titan's data. Others said he'd suffered a breakdown after his wife left. Either way, the world had chosen its side. His own family didn't bother hiding their disappointment. At Sunday dinner, his father's voice carried over the sound of cutlery scraping porcelain. "You're 35, Noah. No savings, no job, no wife. What are you even doing with your life?" Noah said nothing. He glanced at the framed family photo by the window. Lydia smiling at a Christmas party years ago, her hand resting lightly on his chest. He remembered that night vividly, snow falling over Dallas, her whispering, "Promise me you'll never give up on us." He had laughed then, saying, "Even if the world turns its back, I'll keep building." Now, the same world had turned, and the echo of her words only hurt. But beneath that quiet pain, something else had begun to stir. Focus. He spent his days revisiting the fragments of Project Helix, realizing what he had once abandoned. The algorithm wasn't just code, it was potential. With the right structure, it could detect financial fraud, predict cyber threats, and rewrite how global banks manage digital security. Edward Stone had stolen his earlier version, yes, but that was only the shell. The real power of Helix lay in the upgrade Noah had never finished. In late nights illuminated by the glow of his monitor, he built and rebuilt the foundation of Helix Core. Every keystroke became a pulse of defiance. Every sleepless hour, another step toward silent justice. And yet, he didn't see it as revenge. Not yet. To him, it was survival. Sometimes he'd pause and stare out the window at the skyline of Titan Holdings' glass tower. The logo shimmered, mocking him. Somewhere in that tower, Lydia and Edward hosted charity dinners, posed for magazines, and smiled for cameras under chandeliers. They were now the city's golden couple, the power CEO and his elegant wife. But what no one knew was that Titan Holdings' security framework was crumbling, because the very foundation it was built on, the code running deep in its system, had a ghost. Noah's ghost, his original code, buried, altered, but still identifiable by its digital DNA, pulsed quietly inside Titan's servers. That's when he began documenting everything. Line by line, he archived evidence, code timestamps, test logs, even internal emails he'd saved years ago. And with every new entry, his plan became clearer. Not to destroy Edward, but to outgrow him so completely that the fall would come naturally. Months passed. His fridge stayed nearly empty, his clothes unchanged, but his mind sharpened with purpose. One evening, while debugging a complex loop, his computer pinged with an incoming email. The sender's name froze him. Evelyn Monroe, founder of Aurora Capital Ventures. Her message was short. Mr. Grant, I've reviewed your algorithm proposal. I believe it can change the global fintech industry. Let's discuss a partnership. He reread it 5 times, half convinced it was a scam. Evelyn Monroe, the same woman whose firm had funded multi-billion-dollar startups and taken them public within months, had somehow seen his anonymous pitch. That night, he walked to the rooftop of his apartment and looked up at the stars. The same stars he and Lydia once watched on their honeymoon in Miami, when she'd told him he was too small for a big world. He smiled faintly. Let's see how small I am now. Their first meeting was at the Aurora headquarters, a sleek white building that smelled of success. Evelyn was older, poised with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She studied him quietly before speaking. You don't talk much, she said. That's good. Men who talk less often build more. He smiled faintly. I was taught that silence is survival. She nodded, understanding more than he'd said. I'll fund you, but I want you to remain invisible. No interviews, no photos. I need the world to believe Aurora built this from the ground up, until the time is right. He hesitated. Why? Her eyes softened. Because I've seen what happens when power knows where genius lives. It kills it. That was the first time Noah felt seen. Within months, Helix Core Technologies became Aurora's quiet backbone, revolutionizing cybersecurity. Bankers, CEOs, and government agencies signed on, unaware that the mind behind the system was the same man they had dismissed as irrelevant. But while his wealth grew, so did his curiosity. Evelyn Monroe had no heirs, no husband, no children. Yet she treated him like the son she never had, mentoring him in business, ethics, and the ruthless grace of survival. Sometimes she'd say things that stuck in his mind like, true revenge is not in their ruin, Noah. It's in your rise. 2 years later, Edward Stone was still bragging about Titan's new proprietary security model. Unaware it was built on technology Noah had now completely outclassed. The first article appeared on a Thursday morning. Aurora Capital launches new global security system, industry valued at $50 billion. Edward saw it during a board meeting and laughed. No system can outperform ours, he said. But that laughter would not last. For now, Noah stayed silent, watching, building, preparing. Because while Lydia and Edward toasted their empire at charity galas, Noah had already built his, quietly, invisibly, and far stronger. He wasn't poor anymore, but he was patient. And one day soon, the same people who mocked his fall would stand before him, begging to understand how the man they destroyed became the one who owned them all. The year Noah Grant turned 37, Dallas had almost forgotten his name. Yet somewhere between the glossy towers of Titan Holdings and the quiet brilliance of Aurora Capital, a ghost was rewriting destiny. Under his new identity, Nathan Cole, Noah's transformation had become complete. His old life was gone, sealed behind contracts, NDAs, and corporate walls. The world no longer saw the poor analyst who'd been mocked by his wife and fired by his boss. They saw a visionary, the silent genius whose technology was redefining modern finance. But beneath that polished calm, Noah's memory remained haunted by faces from the past. Lydia's scorn, Edward's smirk, his mother's disappointment. Sometimes when the boardroom lights dimmed after a presentation, he'd glance at his reflection in the glass wall and see the same man who once ate alone in a dark apartment, coding until dawn. Evelyn Monroe saw it too. She was the only one who knew who he truly was. One evening, she invited him to her estate, a sprawling modern villa overlooking Lake Ray Hubbard. As they dined beneath chandeliers, she studied him the way one studies a successor. Nathan, she said softly, you've built something remarkable, but I know there's still pain in your silence. Who are you really building this for? He hesitated. Then with quiet conviction, he said, for every man who was told he wasn't enough, for every dream someone laughed at, and for one woman who believed money could buy peace. Evelyn's eyes glistened. Then build until she drowns in her own regret. After dinner, she showed him her private study. Walls lined with antique books and sealed files. She opened a drawer and handed him a folder. "My lawyers will need your signature on these," she said casually. "It's a joint trust for Helix Core's next expansion." But when he skimmed through the pages, something made him pause. The clauses extended beyond mere partnership. They gave him power of attorney in the event of her incapacitation. He looked up, puzzled. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Her smile was faint, almost maternal. "Because, Noah Grant, I see more of myself in you than in anyone I've ever met." He froze. He hadn't told her his real name. She laughed softly at his expression. "You didn't really think I fund billion-dollar systems without knowing who I'm trusting, did you? I knew from the moment you sent that anonymous proposal. The humility, the precision. It had the soul of a man who'd lost everything, but still refused to break." He felt his chest tighten. For the first time since Lydia left, someone had recognized him, not for what he'd built, but for what he'd survived. From that night, Evelyn became more than a mentor. She was his compass. He learned not just finance, but power, the subtle art of moving unseen while controlling everything. "Never let them know what you own," she'd say. "Control doesn't come from signatures. It comes from silence." Under her guidance, Noah began acquiring stakes in multiple firms, quietly through holding companies that all traced back to Helix Core. His influence spread through cybersecurity, banking, and private equity. To the public, Aurora Capital appeared to be expanding rapidly. Only Evelyn and Noah knew the truth. The empire was slowly becoming his. Lydia, meanwhile, had grown used to Edward's wealth. Charity galas, designer gowns, photographs in business magazines. Yet there were cracks in her perfection. Edward had grown distant, paranoid, drinking more, sleeping less. One evening, she overheard him on a call mentioning a data breach inside Titan's old framework. He'd slammed his phone down and muttered, "I should have crushed that Grant kid when I had the chance." She didn't understand what he meant, but his tone unsettled her. Back at Aurora, Noah continued to refine Helix Core's architecture. Each update reinforced its dominance over the very systems Titan used. And with every new contract Aurora signed, Titan's stock slipped just a little lower. The city's power began to shift, imperceptibly but steadily. Then one morning, Evelyn collapsed in her office. A stroke. It was sudden, silent, and irreversible. She never regained consciousness. The news broke across the financial world within hours. Evelyn Monroe, founder of Aurora Capital Ventures, in critical condition. Noah rushed to the hospital, standing at her bedside as machines hummed softly around her. The woman who had rebuilt his life now lay motionless. He held her hand, whispering, "You once said I'd build until she drowned in regret. I promise I'll finish what you started." 2 weeks later, she was gone. Her funeral drew the nation's elite. Bankers, politicians, tech moguls. Lydia and Edward attended too, representing Titan Holdings. As they stood near the back of the hall, Edward whispered, "Monroe's death leaves a power vacuum. Aurora's new CEO will be a child compared to us." But Noah stood at the front, expression unreadable. He didn't approach them, didn't need to. He simply laid a white rose on Evelyn's coffin, then walked away, her attorney following closely behind. 3 days later, invitations went out to all stakeholders for the official reading of Evelyn Monroe's will. Noah didn't attend as a guest. He attended as the name at the top of the document. When the attorney opened the will, silence swept across the room. Edward adjusted his tie. Lydia leaned forward, both expecting to hear a board member's name. Instead, the lawyer read aloud, "I, Evelyn Grace Monroe, leave my entire estate, including controlling interest in Aurora Capital Ventures, all real assets, and liquid holdings valued at $50 billion, to my partner and successor, Mr. Burberry, our Noah Alexander Grant." The shock rippled like thunder. Lydia's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. Edward's face drained of color. Cameras flashed. Noah simply stood there, calm and still, watching every face in that room break under the weight of disbelief. The poor man they mocked, fired, and replaced now stood as the inheritor of the empire that would soon decide their fate. But he didn't speak. Not yet, because the game had only just begun. The morning after the will was read, Dallas woke to chaos. Headlines roared across every financial network. Unknown tech partner inherits $50 billion Aurora empire. Evelyn Monroe's secret successor identified as ex-analyst Noah Grant. By noon, social media was ablaze with speculation. Who was Noah Grant? How did a man with no public record of wealth suddenly become the sole heir to one of America's most powerful financial dynasties? Cameras camped outside Aurora Capital's glass headquarters, reporters clawing for any trace of his past. Inside that tower, Noah stood alone before the panoramic skyline. He wore a black tailored suit, the same calm expression he'd had during the will reading. Beneath that composure, however, his mind replayed every detail. Lydia's stunned silence, Edward's trembling jaw, his parents' disbelief. The image of his mother clutching her pearls when she saw his name on television still burned in his thoughts. For years, she had introduced him as our struggling one. Now she couldn't even reach him by phone. As he looked out over the city, Evelyn's words echoed, "Never let them know what you own." That advice had never felt more relevant, because even though the public believed he was now one of the richest men in the world, they had no idea how much power he truly held, or how much more was coming. Across town, Edward Stone sat in his office, jaw tight, eyes glued to the TV. The news anchor was saying something he could barely process. Evelyn Monroe's successor, Mr. Noah Grant, now holds controlling interest in Aurora Capital, the firm responsible for Titan Holdings' current cybersecurity infrastructure. Edward slammed his fist on the desk. "Grant? It can't be. That man's finished. He was nothing." Lydia, sitting nearby in a pristine white dress, tried to hide her unease. "Edward, what if he's really the one behind Aurora's systems?" "Impossible," Edward muttered. "He's a fraud. I built this industry." But deep down, a flicker of panic crawled through him. There had been signs he ignored. The strange lag in Titan servers, the occasional glitch in their encrypted systems, the reports of silent breaches no one could trace. And now the realization began to form. Those weren't coincidences. They were signatures, Noah's signatures. By afternoon, invitations were delivered to Titan Holdings board members. An urgent shareholders meeting called by Aurora Capital's new chairman. The envelope bore Noah's seal. That evening, the boardroom buzzed with tension. Edward entered, flanked by attorneys, his confidence thinly veiled. When the double doors opened again, Noah walked in quietly, flanked by two Aurora executives. The air shifted. Even those who had once dismissed him now straightened their ties. Edward forced a smile. Well, the phoenix rises. Congratulations on your inheritance, Noah. Or should I say, Nathan Cole." Noah met his gaze without flinching. "You always were good with words, Edward, just not with honesty." A few executives exchanged wary glances. "I don't understand," Edward said, feigning amusement. "You think inheriting Aurora makes you my equal?" Noah placed a sleek black folder on the table. "No, Edward, it makes me your employer." He opened the folder and slid documents across the table. Legal evidence of Aurora's acquisition of Titan Holdings' majority shares. Quietly, strategically, Evelyn had bought Titan's undervalued stock through shell companies months before her death. And now, by extension, Noah owned it all. The room fell into stunned silence. Edward's voice cracked. This is manipulation." "No," Noah said calmly. "It's mathematics. Something you never understood." He leaned forward slightly, his tone precise. "Titan's cybersecurity system, the one you claimed as proprietary, was built on stolen code. Mine. I have timestamps, patent records, and even your internal emails to prove it. You built your empire on a lie. Now it belongs to the man you tried to destroy." Lydia's face drained of color. The pen in her hand fell, clattering softly against the glass table. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "You've already won." Noah looked at her for a long moment, not with hatred, but with the heavy stillness of someone who had seen too much. "I'm not doing this for revenge," he said. "I'm doing this for balance. You took my peace. Edward took my purpose. Evelyn gave me back both, and now I'm restoring what's mine. Edward lunged for the documents, but one of Noah's team intercepted him. Lawyers rushed to confiscate the files. The board murmured as Edward shouted threats, but no one intervened. Power had shifted. When Noah walked out of the building that night, reporters swarmed him under the bright lights of the parking lot. Microphones thrust forward, questions overlapping. Mr. Grant, how does it feel to own your former employer's company? Will you fire Edward Stone? What about your ex-wife? He didn't answer. He simply adjusted his cufflinks and got into the waiting black car. As the door shut, the noise faded into silence. Inside, his assistant handed him a phone, a message from an unknown number. It was from his mother. We saw the news. Your father wants to apologize. Come home. Noah stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he powered off the phone and looked out the window as the city lights blurred past. He remembered Evelyn's voice again, softer this time. True revenge isn't loud. It's inevitable. And though the city outside celebrated his name, Noah felt only a strange calm. The storm had only begun to settle, and beneath it lay something deeper. The ache of unfinished justice. Because what none of them knew yet, not Lydia, not Edward, not even the world, was that Evelyn's will had one final clause, still sealed until a specific date. And when that clause was revealed, it wouldn't just change their lives, it would destroy them. Rain clouds gathered over Dallas that afternoon, casting long gray shadows across Titan Holdings headquarters. Inside, chaos had replaced luxury. Board members whispered in corners, reporters camped outside the lobby, and Edward Stone's office, once the symbol of corporate dominance, now felt like a cage closing in on him. The SEC had opened an investigation within 24 hours of Noah's takeover. Anonymous whistleblower documents had been submitted. Line-by-line evidence showing that Titan's core systems were built using stolen Helix code. It was airtight. Every timestamp matched Noah's original patents, and the paper trail led straight to Edward's desk. He sat alone, staring at his reflection in the dark window, clutching a glass of whiskey. Behind him, Lydia paced anxiously, her phone buzzing nonstop with messages from tabloids. Edward, she said softly, you need to fix this before it ruins everything. You can't just let him... Let him what? Edward snapped. Take what's mine. He's nothing but a lucky charity case who stumbled into Evelyn Monroe's fortune. But even as he spoke, his voice trembled, because deep down he knew luck had nothing to do with it. Downstairs in a private conference room, Noah waited. He didn't need guards or security. Power itself was his armor now. As Edward entered, Noah didn't rise. He simply gestured toward the chair opposite him. Sit, he said. Edward hesitated but obeyed. Lydia lingered by the door, uncertain. You wanted this meeting, Edward began, forcing confidence into his tone. Say what you came to say. Noah leaned back, his voice calm, steady, surgical. You once told me I wasn't built for this world, that I was too honest. So tell me, Edward, how does it feel to be audited by it? Edward's jaw tightened. You think this is justice? You think you can just humiliate me and walk away clean? Noah slid a document across the table. That's your exit package. Sign it, and Titan Holdings becomes a full subsidiary of Aurora Capital. You'll retain 5% equity under my oversight. Edward laughed bitterly. You expect me to sign away my company? No, Noah said quietly. I expect you to remember what happens to men who steal from ghosts. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lydia stepped closer, her voice trembling. Noah, please. Edward made mistakes, but you've already won. Don't destroy him. Noah turned his gaze toward her, and for a moment his expression softened. You think this is destruction? This is mercy. I could have let the investigation run its course, watched the headlines bury him, watched your house auctioned, your name's erased. But I'm giving you a chance to bow out quietly. She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. Why are you doing this? Because you taught me what power feels like when it's taken, he said. Now I'm teaching you what it feels like when it's returned. Edward lunged forward suddenly, slamming his hands on the table. You think you're untouchable because that old woman left you her empire? You're still that same broke analyst I fired. You're nothing without her. Noah's voice remained level. You're right. I was nothing until you made me lose everything. That's what forged me. You built me, Edward. So I'll let you live with that. He rose slowly, straightened his jacket, and nodded toward the contract. You have until tomorrow. After that, the world learns exactly how Titan Holdings stole its fortune. As Noah walked out, Lydia's voice broke behind him. Noah, please. What do you want from us? He paused at the door, not turning back. Nothing. You already gave me everything I needed. Outside, the air was heavy with rain. His driver opened the car door, but Noah didn't get in immediately. He looked up at the Titan Tower one last time, the glass panels reflecting the storm clouds gathering overhead. He remembered when he used to climb those same steps with hope in his chest, believing loyalty meant something. Now he understood that loyalty was only real when it was to yourself. As thunder rolled across the skyline, he murmured to himself, she always said revenge wasn't loud. She was right. By nightfall, the story broke. Titan Holdings CEO Edward Stone under federal investigation. Aurora Capital confirms hostile takeover. New CEO to restructure company. The next morning, Noah arrived at the same office where he'd once been humiliated. The receptionist froze, recognizing him. Mr. Grant. Mr. Cole. Sir, good morning. He gave a faint smile. Morning, Dana. You've done well here. You're staying. The staff watched as he entered Edward's former office. The walls were stripped bare, the desk empty. He sat in the leather chair once reserved for the man who'd fired him. The irony was silent but deafening. He placed a small photograph on the desk, a picture of himself and Lydia taken years ago at a company retreat. They were smiling then, full of dreams and youth. He studied it for a long time before sliding it into the drawer and locking it. Outside his window, lightning split the clouds, illuminating the skyline. Titan Tower had always stood as a monument to greed and arrogance. Now it was a symbol of rebirth. At that moment, his assistant entered. Sir, there's a letter from Miss Monroe's estate. It's marked private, only to be opened by you. Noah took it, recognizing Evelyn's elegant handwriting. His pulse quickened. He opened it slowly, the sound of paper tearing echoing in the quiet office. Inside, a single line in her handwriting. When they kneel, forgive none, but remember who you were before they broke you. And below it, a sealed legal envelope labeled Clause 2, to be activated upon transfer of Titan Holdings. He exhaled deeply, a small knowing smile forming. Whatever Evelyn had set in motion wasn't finished. Her will had one more chapter left to write. For now he leaned back in Edward's chair, the storm reflecting in his eyes. The man they once mocked as poor now owned everything they worshipped. But in that silence, he whispered to himself, this isn't revenge. This is resurrection. The storm had passed, but Dallas still carried its chill. The next morning, sunlight glimmered through the wide glass windows of Noah's new office, Edward Stone's old throne. The air smelled of fresh polish, but the echoes of arrogance still lingered in the corners. From this height, the whole city stretched beneath him, the same city that once watched him fall. On his desk sat a silver frame, a photo of him and his parents from years ago, smiling outside their family home. He hadn't seen them since the day they told him he was a disgrace, but now every news channel in America carried his face. Noah Grant, from divorce and debt to a $50 billion empire. That morning, his phone buzzed with messages he'd never expected to see. One was from his father. We're proud of you, son. Can we see you? Another from his mother. Your father hasn't slept. He wants to apologize. For hours, Noah didn't answer. The child in him wanted to run to them, but the man they'd abandoned had already buried that part long ago. By evening, he drove to his parents' house in North Dallas. Not in the dented sedan they once mocked him for driving, but in a black Rolls-Royce. When he stepped out, neighbors peeked through windows, whispering. His mother, Irene, opened the door, her hands trembling. Noah, she whispered. He stood there for a moment, studying her. She looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile. Behind her, his father sat in the living room, his cane resting against the armchair. The same man who once said, "You'll never make it without her." Noah entered silently. The air smelled of old memories, warm soup, wood polish, regret. His father rose slowly, guilt heavy in his eyes. "I owe you an apology, son," Samuel began. "We should have believed in you. We were wrong." Noah nodded, but his voice was calm, distant. "You didn't have to believe in me. You just had to stand by me when I had nothing." His father's eyes watered. "We thought we were helping you toughen up. We didn't realize we were breaking you." Noah exhaled softly, emotion flickering for the first time. "You didn't break me. You just showed me how alone ambition can feel." His mother stepped closer, clutching his hand. "We're proud of you, Noah. Truly proud." He smiled faintly. "Then honor me by never pitying me again." They talked for a while, about his company, about Evelyn Monroe, about how everything changed. But when he left, he didn't promise to come back soon. Forgiveness, he knew, didn't erase memory. It only made space for peace. That night, as his car pulled up outside his penthouse, another figure stood waiting. Lydia. She looked different. Her hair was tied back, her clothes simple, her eyes swollen. In her hands was a folded newspaper, her photo on the front page beside Edward's. Titan CEO indicted for fraud. "Noah," she called softly, her voice cracking. The guard stepped forward, but Noah raised a hand. "Let her through." She walked slowly, the sound of her heels hollow against the marble floor. When she finally stood before him, her eyes brimmed with tears. "I didn't come here to beg," she said. "I came to tell you, Edward's been arrested. They froze our accounts. I have nothing left." Noah said nothing. She took a deep breath. "When I left you, I thought I was choosing stability. I thought Edward was security, and you were a dreamer. But you were the only one who ever saw me for who I was. You believed in me before anyone else did." He studied her quietly. "Belief doesn't survive betrayal, Lydia." She stepped closer. "I know I hurt you, and I know I can't fix it. But I had to tell you, I'm sorry. For everything." For a moment, Noah saw the woman she used to be. The one who brought him tea during late nights of coding, who laughed at his terrible jokes, who once believed in someday. But that woman was gone. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a check, and handed it to her. "This is $1 million. Use it to start over. Don't waste it chasing someone else's reflection again." Her lips trembled. "You think money can fix what we broke?" "No," he said softly. "But it can remind you what loyalty could have earned you if you'd waited." Tears streamed down her face. "Do you still hate me?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "I don't hate you, Lydia. I just stopped needing you." She sobbed quietly, folding the check and clutching it like a confession. "I wish I'd never left." He nodded once. "I wish you'd stayed long enough to see who I could become." As she turned to leave, her reflection caught in the glass walls of his building. One woman walking away from everything she thought she wanted, and one man standing in the empire she helped create by abandoning him. When she disappeared into the night, Noah returned to his office. On his desk lay Evelyn's sealed envelope, still unopened. He ran his fingers over it, remembering her last words. "When they kneel, forgive none, but remember who you were before they broke you." He opened the envelope carefully. Inside, another letter. Handwritten, deliberate. "Noah, by the time you read this, you'll have reclaimed your destiny. But the true test of a man isn't how he rises. It's how he rebuilds others when he has power. I've left a second fund, under your name, for the people whose lives your enemies destroyed. Use it well, and your empire will never fall. Evelyn." He smiled faintly, folding the letter. Outside, the lights of the city pulsed like a heartbeat. He whispered, "You never stopped teaching me, Evelyn." And for the first time in years, Noah felt peace, not triumph, not vengeance, but the quiet calm of a man who had conquered the world and still remembered his soul. But somewhere deep inside, that peace was an unfinished whisper. The final phase of his rise was yet to come, because Evelyn's fund wasn't just money. It was a mirror, and soon it would reflect who Noah Grant truly was, the savior or the shadow of everything he had fought to overcome. Weeks passed. The storm of media frenzy had quieted, but whispers of Evelyn Monroe's second fund began to stir within Dallas's financial circles. Everyone speculated what it was: a secret charity, a hidden project, or another empire in disguise. Noah alone knew the truth, though even he hadn't yet uncovered its full weight. The letter had mentioned rebuilding others, but something in Evelyn's tone, something buried in that final line, lingered in his mind like an echo. Your empire will never fall if you remember who you were before they broke you. Late one night, Noah sat alone in the top-floor study of his penthouse, the city glowing beneath him. A storm was brewing outside. Soft thunder, the kind that hums rather than roars. He opened Evelyn's sealed archives, the ones her attorney had delivered weeks earlier. Inside were a few ledgers, property deeds, and a USB drive labeled simply Helix Legacy. When he inserted it, the screen filled with encrypted files. As he decrypted them, his heartbeat slowed. It wasn't just a fund, it was a network. Evelyn had used part of her wealth to build secret startup incubators across the country, each led by someone society had written off. Widows, single fathers, discharged veterans, people who'd been fired unfairly or cheated out of their work. Dozens of names, dozens of stories like his. Every file carried a short note in Evelyn's handwriting. They broke him. They mocked her. They underestimated them. And at the bottom of the index, one final entry appeared: Project Redemption, Dallas Division. When Noah opened it, his breath caught. There were familiar names on the file: Titan Holdings, Lydia Stone, Edward Stone, Grant Family Estate. Evelyn had been tracking his life, every detail, long before he ever knew her. She hadn't just chosen him as a successor. She had been building a test, a crucible for what kind of man he would become after winning everything. As he scrolled further, a single video file blinked to life. Evelyn appeared on screen, her face calm but grave. If you're watching this, Noah, it means you've done what I knew you would. Turned loss into legacy. But understand this, I didn't give you power to destroy. I gave it to you so you decide who deserves to rise beside you. You can use this fund to rebuild what your enemies ruined, or you can weaponize it. That choice will define the man history remembers. The video ended, leaving the room in silence. Outside, lightning flashed across the skyline, reflecting off the glass walls like fractured light on water. He leaned back, running a hand across his face. For the first time, the question Evelyn had planted years ago began to weigh on him. Had his revenge gone too far? That same week, the fallout from Edward's arrest deepened. Titan Holdings was on the brink of collapse. Thousands of employees faced layoffs. Factories shut down. Families lost their livelihoods. Noah's advisors told him it was just collateral, business casualties. But every night, he saw their faces in the news. Men and women who had nothing to do with Edward's greed were now paying the price for it. Then one afternoon, his assistant entered with a report. Sir, you'll want to see this. It's about the layoffs at the Fort Worth branch. The report showed pictures: engineers being escorted out of buildings, mothers packing their desks with tears in their eyes, guards locking the gates. In one photo, a man in a cheap suit clutched a box of personal items, a framed picture of his wife and 2 kids. Noah stared at it for a long time. Something inside him twisted. He remembered the night he'd been fired, walking down those same steps, holding his termination letter, believing his life was over. He whispered to himself, "This isn't who I'm supposed to be." That night, he went back to Evelyn's archives. He found the coordinates of the first redemption center, an unmarked warehouse in downtown Dallas. When he arrived, it wasn't what he expected. Inside were offices, classrooms, and workspaces filled with people. Programmers, accountants, ex-Titan employees, all rebuilding under Aurora's banner. A young man approached him nervously, unaware who he was. "You here to apply too?" Noah hesitated. "Maybe," he said. "What do you do here?" The man smiled. "We get second chances. Some woman named Monroe started this. Said she believed people who've been broken make the best builders." Noah's chest tightened. Evelyn's presence filled the air. Her philosophy was alive, quiet, invisible, but powerful. He walked deeper inside, seeing the people he'd once thought of as casualties now thriving, retrained, reemployed, reborn. He realized that this was Evelyn's true empire. Not the money, not the headlines, but the legacy of rebuilding the broken. When he returned to his office that night, he called a press conference. Reporters filled the atrium, flashing cameras, hungry for another headline. But instead of boasting about acquisitions or profits, Noah stepped to the podium and spoke plainly. A few years ago, I was humiliated, fired, and forgotten. I thought revenge would give me peace. But today, I stand here to tell you, it didn't. Evelyn Monroe once told me that power means nothing unless it lifts others. So I'm creating a new division, Project Redemption, to restore every job lost through Titan's corruption and to invest in those the system failed. Because the measure of a man isn't what he gains, but what he restores. The crowd erupted in applause. But among the reporters, Lydia stood quietly at the back, tears filling her eyes. She realized now that the man she left had become something Edward could never be. Not just powerful, but purposeful. As the cameras flashed, Noah felt a calm he hadn't known in years. The ghosts were gone. Evelyn's lesson had come full circle. That night he stood on the balcony overlooking Dallas, wind brushing his face. The lights below shimmered like stars trapped on earth. He whispered softly, almost to the sky, I finally remembered who I was before they broke me. And for the first time since the day she left, Noah Grant, the man once mocked, betrayed, and forgotten, felt whole again. He had won, but more importantly, he had become. The night Dallas lit up for Aurora Capital's Legacy Gala, every skyline tower seemed to glow in Noah Grant's name. But this wasn't just another celebration of wealth. It was a reckoning. The night when everything that had been broken would finally come full circle. Cameras lined the red carpet outside the Carlton Grand, where dignitaries, investors, and journalists gathered under the warm lights. The theme was Rebuilding Tomorrow. Noah had chosen it himself. Inside the ballroom, a massive digital screen displayed Evelyn Monroe's portrait, her calm smile overlooking the city she'd once ruled. Noah arrived late, not out of arrogance, but reflection. As the Rolls-Royce door opened, flashes erupted, questions fired. Mr. Grant, how does it feel to be the richest man in Texas? Are you planning to expand Aurora globally? But his mind wasn't on expansion or money. Tonight wasn't about empire. It was about meaning. As he walked through the gala's golden doors, his steps echoed in memory. He had once stood at another gala years ago, Lydia on his arm, Edward across the room, champagne in his hand but doubt in his heart. He'd felt small then, invisible. Now the same chandeliers that once looked down on him glowed in silent apology. The crowd hushed as he took the stage. Behind him, Evelyn's face filled the screen once more, her voice playing from a recording, her final message to her successor. Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we leave alive. The audience applauded, some tearing up. Then Noah spoke, his voice steady, rich with quiet conviction. There was a time I thought success meant proving people wrong, that revenge was justice. But I learned something Evelyn always knew. Revenge feeds pride, not peace. What truly defines us is how we use our victories to lift others. He paused, scanning the room. His parents seated in the front row, humbled but proud. Employees from Project Redemption standing in quiet gratitude. And at the back, Lydia, her hands clasped together, watching with tearful eyes. Tonight, I dedicate this legacy to those who were told they'd never rise again. To every dreamer crushed by betrayal, every builder mocked for being too small, every soul that refused to stay broken. You are the reason I'm standing here. The applause thundered. Cameras flashed like lightning, freezing that moment forever. The poor man they'd mocked now standing not just as a billionaire, but as a redeemer. After the speeches, the music softened. Noah walked out to the balcony overlooking the glittering city. From here, Dallas shimmered like an ocean of light. He could see the Titan Tower in the distance, no longer bearing Edward's name, but a new one, the Monroe Grant Center for Innovation. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was transformation. Lydia approached quietly behind him, hesitant. The night wind caught her hair, and for a brief moment, it was as if time folded. Two people meeting again where pain had once begun. You did it, she said softly. Everything you dreamed of. Noah turned slightly, his expression unreadable but gentle. Dreams don't mean much without purpose, Lydia. I used to chase recognition. Now I chase legacy. She looked away, voice trembling. Do you ever think, if things were different? He stopped her gently. They weren't meant to be different. You chose your path. I chose mine. And both brought us here. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't know you had this kind of strength. He smiled faintly. Neither did I, until you left. They stood in silence, the city breathing beneath them. Finally, she whispered, You've become everything I wanted Edward to be. Noah's gaze drifted upward to the stars. No, Lydia. I became everything I was meant to be when I stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. She nodded, stepping back, her voice barely a whisper. Goodbye, Noah. He didn't stop her. Some goodbyes, he'd learned, were the truest form of closure. As she disappeared into the ballroom crowd, Noah's assistant approached quietly. Sir, it's time. The press wants one final statement before the closing ceremony. He looked at the skyline one last time and said, Tell them this isn't my ending. It's Evelyn's beginning, through every person we help rise. Minutes later, the lights dimmed. The giant screen illuminated one final message, written in white letters over Evelyn's image. Revenge ends when redemption begins. The audience rose in a standing ovation. In that moment, Noah felt something deeper than triumph. The peace of a man who had finally rebuilt not just his fortune, but his faith in himself. Outside, as fireworks blossomed above the city, the camera panned up over the glittering towers, catching the reflection of Noah Grant standing alone on the balcony. The man who had been broken, betrayed, rebuilt, and reborn. The voiceover of Evelyn Monroe's final words closed the night like a whisper from the stars. Some inherit money, some inherit pain, but the greatest inherit purpose and turn it into legacy. And as the fireworks faded into the Texas night, the story of Noah Grant, the poor husband divorced for his boss, mocked by family, but destined to inherit $50 billion, became more than revenge. It became legend.